Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. When I first started reviewing board games, the main aim was to catalogue old, out of production, deeply thematic board games, which was a real passion of mine. But over time, that remit has changed somewhat, and I tend to speak now mainly about miniatures gaming. But today on the channel, we're going a little bit retro. We're going back to my roots here, and we're going to take a look at an old out-of-production fantasy-based game. No, this is not Cones of Dunshire. This is Quest, a classic from the Ravensburger stable that was originally distributed by, of all people, Fisher-Price. This is a game for children aged 10 and up. It plays with 3 to 6 players, and it has a theme that draws on all sorts of fantasy tropes. There's a little bit of Arthurian legend in there, there's a little bit of Lord of the Rings. But it is, despite all of those fantasy elements, quite an abstract game when you look at it, and particularly when you look at the strangely designed board. The board depicts 4 colour-coded states. We have Elgad, Galad, Urgad, and Tirad. And these 4 states all live in glorious prosperity whilst they have possession of a magical ring. But the magical ring is fickle and it doesn't like to stay in any one place for any amount of time. So the states are constantly sending out knights in order to find the ring and bring it to them so that they can flourish. And here's one of the knights. Now, I'm not sure why they didn't go with wizards, but knights is what they went for. And the knights have talismans. They have 3 of these plastic talismans that stick in the bottom of them. And the talismans act like hit points or extra lives, but they're sort of an abstract concept representing your courage, faith, honor, stamina, fortitude, and it will be depleted as your legend wanes, and your talismans will be restored when you can bring the beautiful magical ring to one of the castles on the board. There are 4 castles in total, 1 in each corner, and whenever you take the magical ring to a castle, you will get a colour-matched seal to say that you have delivered the magical ring to that particular castle, and you have to collect a certain amount of these to win the game. Generally, you would need 4, 1 for each of the castles, but you can play a shorter game if you want. So how do you go about achieving this monumental feat? How do you set out on your quest? At the start of the game, your knightly wizards, or wizardly knights, are all placed on the Galad space, and our magic ring is placed down in Tirad in the opposite corner of the board. And then players will take it in turn to move their playing pieces. They can move up to 2 spaces, and spaces on the board are represented by white dots, black dots, the standing stones, the swords in stones, and the dragons. You move between these spaces using the connecting lines. So our green player here can move 1, 2. It is not always possible to move 2 spaces because certain things will block your path. You must always stop when you land on the dragon, and you will stop when you enter a space containing another player, or you will stop on a space that contains an obstacle, and obstacles will be placed on the board over the course of the game. Attempting to slay dragons is dangerous. It can cost you one of your talismans, but it is a way to speed up your quest, to speed up your progress, because you gain certain boons by slaying a dragon. To slay the dragon, you have to first land on the space with a dragon. You then have to determine the value of the dragon, and there is a deck of cards which have a dragon seal on the back. You draw one of these cards, you flip it over, and in this case, the dragon has a strength of 5. So I now have to roll a dice, and on the score of a 5 or 6, I will slay the dragon. If I slay the dragon, I immediately get to take an extra turn, so I can move up 2 more spaces. However, this time, I do not have to stop on barriers, dragons, or other players. I can breeze straight through them. I'm on a high after slaying a dragon, and I am borne on the wings of victory to greater successes. Of course, if I lose to the dragon, I will lose one of my talismans, one of my lives. Furthermore, I sink into a bit of a depression and I have to wear one of these coats of the Forgotten Ones, and that will go over my playing piece, and that means that on my next turn I have to miss a turn. So when my turn comes around again, I will be able to remove the little black ring, and then the turn after that I can continue as normal. So suffering defeat at the hands of a dragon or the claws of a dragon is not a good thing, because this is a race game. Everybody's racing to the ring, everybody's racing to get to the different castles and deliver it. The more time you spend sitting around getting beaten up by dragons, the harder it's going to be for you to actually win. If on your travels you land on one of the magic standing stones, that's these ones here, you get to immediately place a barrier. There are 16 barriers, and you can place one on any white or black spot on the board. And unless you're carrying the magic ring, or unless you have defeated a dragon, you cannot pass through a barrier. So you can use these to slow down your opponents. You can use it to block off certain routes so they have to take extra long trips to get where they want to go. However, there is a way to deal with these barriers in the form of the sword stones that also appear in each state. When you land on one of the sword stones, you can immediately pick a barrier and move it to any other free space of your choice. On your quest, you may also bump into rival knights, in which case there may be a bit of a scuffle. And this is slightly interesting because the combat between players doesn't work in the same way as it does with the dragons. In fact, there is no dice rolling at all. It's a much more tactical choice that you have to make, because actually attacking an opponent hurts you more than it hurts them normally. If our green knight wants to challenge the black knight, he can move into the black knight's space. When he does that, he can immediately banish the black knight to any white space on the board, which are the central ones, so moving him potentially away from a castle. However, doing that costs me some honour. I'm not acting in a very chivalrous manner, so I actually lose one of my own talismans. I actually take damage. I take the hit on my reputation in order to fend off another knight. So generally, you need to think carefully about whether you want to attack or not, and it's usually only worth attacking if your opponent is carrying the magic ring at the time. Because obviously, when you banish the knight, you take the ring from him first, so you will actually acquire the magical ring for yourself. Once you have the ring, it obviously puts a target on your head. Every other knight is going to come chasing after you, and you need to stay one step ahead of them. Fortunately, carrying the ring does offer some advantages, because it is quite clearly the one ring and grants you some form of invisibility. Because while you have the ring, you do not have to stop on dragon spaces, you do not have to stop on opponent knight spaces, and you can move straight through barriers. You're not allowed to stop on barriers, you're not allowed to stop on other knights, but you can move through them freely. So you can blitz yourself away across the land. If you do end up on a dragon space, you would still have to fight the dragon normally, and if you lose that fight, the ring gets knocked off of your finger and rolls away into an empty space in another state. So the ring is a very fickle thing indeed. The castles themselves are generally advantageous spaces to be on. If you arrive at a castle without the ring, you immediately regain one talisman. If you arrive at the castle with a ring, you immediately gain 2 talismans, up to your maximum of 3, and you also gain the appropriate seal for that coloured castle, taking you one step closer towards winning the game. However, once you have done that, the ring will abandon you. You have to immediately put the ring in a free space in any of the other 3 states, potentially gifting it to another player. So as you can see, the ring will keep bouncing around the table, it will keep moving between players, it will keep slipping out of your grasp, and even when you do deliver it, it will move on again. So there is a constant tug of war as the players vie for control of this ring. But that's the game. It is a race, it is a struggle, it is a battle to maintain control of this ring. It's got positional play as you move barriers around and you position your knight as safely as possible. It has push your luck with fighting the dragons, because If you succeed in fighting a dragon, you get to take another turn, but if you lose against the dragon, you will miss a turn and it will set you back. There's always a risk-reward thing going on, and it's a generally interesting game. It's a weird mishmash of thematic elements, slightly abstract Euro mechanics, a very weird isometric type abstract board, playing pieces that are supposed to represent knights but really look more like wizards. It really is. It's an odd game, but it's fun. It's really interesting, and it's suitable for families. The age range is 10 to adult, and I think that's about right because younger children can definitely play this. I've played this with my daughter, who is 9, and she does pretty well at it, but there are certain elements to it that require some deep thought, and it can be a little bit mean when you keep stealing the ring off of other people. So there is that element to it to be aware of. Another good thing is that there is no such thing as player elimination. You can lose all 3 of your talismans, but that doesn't mean you die. All it means is while you don't have any talismans, you're not able to banish opponent knights because you don't have a talisman to discard, and you're not allowed to fight dragons because you haven't got a talisman to discard if you lose. So you're basically a shell of your former self, and you wander the landscape until you can get to a castle and get 1 talisman back. Unfortunately, that does mean once you are on a losing streak and once you have no talismans left, the game becomes quite painful to play because you don't have those options of fighting dragons to get a movement boost, you don't have the option to fend off an opponent knight to steal the ring. You just trudge around until you can get to a castle. You have to wander around all the barriers that people are throwing up in front of you. There is certainly an element of the rich getting richer in this game. Fortunately, once somebody has delivered the ring to a city, it does shoot off across the land to another place. So there is always that chance to make a comeback. It can feel like once you're losing, it's really difficult to get out of that particular situation. And it can be a little bit miserable just moving your 2 spaces, not interacting with other players, not interacting with dragons, just trying to get that 1 extra talisman from a city so you can keep going. I do like this game. I think if you're going to play it with younger players, you might not want to go for delivering the ring to all 4 castles, and I would certainly not recommend playing to all 4 castles if you're playing with up to 6 players because the game will go on forever. But if you're playing with 3 or 4 players, say 2 or 3 seals to win, it can be a good, quick, light game. It is far from being the greatest game in my collection, but I do have fun with this, and it is a game that I will roll out with my wife and my daughter, and we do have fun with this one. But that's all I've got to say about that. Thank you so much for watching. If you have liked the video, please consider pressing that like button. If you have really liked the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.